Hi and welcome to SNP 19 with CommonSpace. It's the big day of the vote on the Growth Commission and the currency decision, what the SNP's position will be on a Scottish currency in the event of independent Scotland. I'm joined here by George Kerevan, former SNP MP and who's been heading up the campaign for an independent currency. So George, nearly a year's worth of debate. And this is the big vote.
Indeed.
How are you feeling ahead of the vote?
Well, I think it's been a big victory for the membership already, because in that year, the debate inside the party, inside the branches, inside the national assemblies, has shifted the position. The original Growth Commission, you'll remember, it mentioned a currency, but it kind of kicked it into the long grass. It was just there in the background. But the membership want a currency, so that's definitely going to happen. The real debate is the timetable and the conditions in which the decision will be made.
So what are you expecting from today's debate? A lot of the emphasis is, during the debate over the past week or so has been put on the politics of this, how it's going to play with voters, whether you have support pound sterling after independence or a currency. Is that going to be the focus of the debate, or is some of the economic issues going to come into it? What are you expecting?
Well, it'll be a mix. But clearly the SNP leadership has gone for the politics, saying, well, you know, we have to appeal to soft no voters, so we want to have as little change as possible. Now, I understand that argument. It's a perfectly reasonable argument. The trouble is it's not going to work on the doorstep, because if you go and knock on the doorstep and you say, we want a Scottish currency, but we can't tell you when we're going to have it, that's just going to die a death. Precisely the people we're trying to reach out to will just say, well, you're confused. You either want it or you don't. We have to show confidence. That's the issue.
So what about the amendments? Because it's a little bit confusing. There's 3 separate amendments today to the SNP leadership's motion. As I understand, Campaign for Independent Currency is put forward Amendment C. If people want a Scottish currency after independence, how should they vote in today's vote?
Right. I've been backing Amendment B, which simply says, in the first Parliament of an independent Scotland, we have to have a currency in place. Right. Obviously, you need a couple of years to get the mechanics, get the central bank set up. But we lay down a timetable within the first Parliament. So that's the simplest, clearest motion there is.
Amendment B.
Amendment C is basically from Commonweal, very well thought out, wants to peg the currency, I fix Scottish pound against the pound sterling, and to introduce on day one. That's a perfectly valid position. I haven't personally put my weight behind it, because I think it's a little bit too specific. I want to get the most delegates behind a simple timetable, but I wouldn't cry if that got passed. Okay. And Amendment D is quite a strong commitment to the currency, but it goes on as soon as practical. And I think that leaves open the issue of the infamous 6 tests, which are mentioned in the Growth Commission report. And the 6 tests essentially mean that the City of London and the bankers will get to decide when we have a currency, and that simply is not acceptable to me. I think should not be acceptable to any SNP member.
Just explain to us that about the 6 tests, because this has been one of the focal points of the debate, whether we should have the tests in or not. What is wrong with a set of criteria like that, which assesses and is supposed to be guidance for the Scottish Parliament to make a decision? Why is that problematic?
Sure. Well, I mean, you need a set of reasons why, right? But why 6 tests, not 5 or 4 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10? They've just been pulled out of thin air. They just appear in the Growth Commission report. And frankly, they are very vague. And frankly, they leave much of the emphasis on the banking community being happy, the financiers being happy. Now, actually, if you want a currency, you set one up. I mean, are there issues? Yes, we need to have reserves, but you know, having foreign currency reserves to back your own currency is actually not of that difficult. In this particular situation, we're converting sterling balances, which you've got in your bank account or you get paid, into new Scottish money. If you want the new Scottish money, you buy it with existing sterling balances. So no Scottish money is going to be issued unless there's already existing reserves. So in a sense, I think that the 6 tests are bogus. They're put there for political reasons. They're kind of they're meant to suggest, oh, we'll only do this when by being very reasonable and very correct, and we'll let our central bank, let the bankers decide. Now, I think that actually introduces a whole level of uncertainty, which makes the matter even worse. If you wanted to have a currency, then you introduce it just as the Baltic states did. You want to do it, you do it. That's what creates the certainty, and all else follows.
One of the other issues that's been raised is the impact that this policy, the SNP leadership's policy, would have on entering the EU after independence. Kirsty Hughes, the director of the Scottish Council for European Relations, published a piece on Friday where she said it would make it extremely problematic for an independent Scotland to enter the EU if the rest of, if you were using a currency which was outside the EU, i.e. the rest of UK post-Brexit was outside the EU. Is that something that delegates should take into account today when they're considering their decision on how to vote?
Well, I wasn't quite following her argument because if you're a country joining the EU and then you have to sign up to the formal agreement that at some point you might look towards joining the euro, you have to have your own currency in place.
Sure.
So that they can measure how much you're supposed to pay into EU budgets, so that you can work out the exchange rate that you might convert to from your currency into the euro. So actually, my view would be it makes it much simpler to ultimately join the EU and progress down that road if you have your own currency and your own central bank.
Sure. I think that's the argument that she was making, that sterlingisation would make it much more difficult to do so.
Sterlingisation is a big fancy word for saying we keep the pound.
Keep the pound.
But yeah, I mean, we wouldn't therefore have control over exchange rates and conversion rates. I mean, above all, the problem with sterlingisation, I have to say, it's a real hostage to fortune, because if you keep the pound, but you don't, your own central bank, or Scottish central bank, doesn't have the capacity to create its own reserves, i.e. to print money to bail out your banks if your banks get into trouble, then you've created a financial system that you can't underpin, you can't protect. I would find that a long period of sterlingisation would be very dangerous, I think.
What about trying to look ahead after the vote today? If the vote goes against your side of the argument, against Scottish currency advocates, what does it mean for the independence movement, and what would you say to people, supporters of a Scottish currency, that what should they do then? What should be their next move if the amendments fail today and the motions are passed unamended for the SNP leadership's position?
Sure. Well, just to remind us, if the substantive motion from Derek Mackay and Keith Brown passes with amendment,
yes,
then we still get the currency. The SNP, for the first time in its history, would be committed to creating a Scottish currency. And it would be committed to putting all the apparatus in place for that currency, including a central bank. It would just leave open the timetable, even though there's a general inference, if you talk to Keith and Derek, that it would be as fast as possible. So I don't think if all the amendments fail today that the debate goes away. I mean, I think if we have an independence referendum within the next 2 years, which I hope, then what happens then? We start having a debate about sterlingisation, and I think the party will be forced to retreat on sterlingisation because it's such a dangerous concept. And in the middle of an independence referendum debate, people are going to say, the general public is going to say, when are you going to introduce the currency? And I think leadership will be forced to provide a timetable. So, we have a base camp, even if the main motion passes unamended, which is we're going to have a currency, we're going to have it soon. The debate will go on as to when, and I think it should be in the first Parliament.
So don't expect it to be all over after today. As George says, the debate's likely to continue. But CommonSpace will be following the debate very closely. It starts at 2 p.m. In the main hall, and you'll be able to follow it, all live updates on CommonSpace's Twitter at the CommonSpace, and regular reports of what's going on at the website commonspace.scot. Thanks very much for joining us.